Hey Trails Collective, Ian here. This round we are going to be digging into another shoe that I've been anxiously awaiting since probably mid-2019 when I was cued into the development. This is going to be the North Face Signature Flight VECTIV. So the last round, just last week, we released a review of the VECTIV Infinite, a model that I put maybe 100 or so miles into, and well, you have to go check that out to see what I thought. I'll give you a couple comparisons here. But this one, we're going to be digging into the Signature Flight VECTIV. So, North Face, what they were really after with the VECTIV project. So as good entrepreneurs do, they reached out to see what kind of problem was experienced with their trail and elite team, or actually runners as a whole through UTMB. And one of the pieces of feedback that they got was a limiter to performance at UTMB was runners' legs just got tired. And so my first reaction to, I think, hearing and reading of that motivation, prompting them to redo their whole line was, yeah, I mean, what do you think? These runners are covering 106 miles with, I think it's like 32,000 feet of elevation gain. Of course their legs are going to get tired. And if they're not getting tired, the athletes are probably on lots and lots of drugs. But in any case, they sought to solve that problem. And what they were looking to solve it with was a mechanic or combination of materials that would lessen the fatigue in runners' legs. And so what they came up with was the VECTIV project. And what the VECTIV line is it's a combination of a rocker midsole geometry paired with a certain intentioned plate of varied materials on top of a really, I think, slickly done upper. In this case, the Flight VECTIV, really a beautiful shoe. The upper is an engineered knit on the vamp or over the toe box. Weaves into with a matrix fabric here, and we'll dig into a little bit what makes that special if you're not familiar with matrix yet. Goes back into an engineered knit collar, sits on top of a carbon plate, a first in trail running, and then that sits on top of an EVA midsole with a geometry which is really, I think, well done in terms of rocker design. Has a pretty grippy or sticky outsole with a variable lug configuration. So clearly they put a lot of time, resources, and I think testing into the shoe. Now, does that mean it's all sunshine and lollipops? Well, let's break it down, dig in, and see, well, really how it runs and what it's all about.
'Cause I wanna be like the wind, I wanna run with you, we can be wolves, howling at the prey white moon. I wanna be by your side when we light up the sky for the world to see. Run, 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 run with me.
All right, so one of the first pieces, and I probably almost went into this review, both the review in writing as well as the verbal review here for YouTube, without addressing the color. But I think one of the first things that I'm seeing on any number of social media threads is the question of why on earth would North Face create a white trail shoe? And I almost saw that as kind of beside the point. But I'm not going to lie. I think when I first saw it in pre-production and saw the choice of colors, I really wanted to put my palm to my forehead here and say, come on. And so the intention is, well, it's a pretty huge rollout of this whole series for North Face, combined with a larger package. And I really think it's just the team colors or colorway is white and black at the moment. You see it on their Signature or North Face vest line. And I think it's just part of the larger branding of the package. Historically, North Face used white and blue and orange. I think that this shoe would look beautiful with a blue upper as well as with some of the white highlights. But in any case, that's really, I think, just the reality of what they chose. I think with the colorway, unfortunately, they're going to lose some sales. And it's just going to be the way it is. But in any case, that has nothing to do with the feel, the function of the shoe, so we're going to leave it there and move on. So let's start with the things that do matter. We're going to take in first with the specs of the shoe. the price, $199, right? Top tier. And there are some models historically where the price points I feel like didn't necessarily align with the materials that were going into the shoe. In the case of the VECTIV series, and in this case the Flight VECTIV, I think it really does make sense in terms of the premium materials and design that they're using. So that's another top line, going to potentially break some people, put it out of reach. But it is what it is. Weight, 10 ounces for, I believe, is a men's 9, 8.6 ounces for women's 8. I don't have a full size run in yet to the shop, so I can't weigh that and let you know whether that's accurate or not. The sizing for me runs true to size. It has a fairly straight last, a decent amount of width in the midfoot, which I really like, and a fairly straight toe box. So I think it'll accommodate most foot types. The in-house, well, their listed stack height is 25 millimeters in the heel, 19 millimeters in the forefoot for a drop of 6 millimeters. Because I felt like I was getting some, I guess, not consistent stack measures from companies. Some time ago, I did purchase my own digital goniometer, and so I do my own in-house measures now as well. So what I get is the insole, 3.5 millimeters. The lasting of the shoe on the inside there is, I think, somewhere around 2.5 millimeters. The plate, I think, although I can't get a accurate read on it, I think is between 1 and 2 millimeters. The midsole stack, I think, is around 19 millimeters in the heel, 13 in the forefoot. The base outsole rubber, so beneath the lugs, is around 2 millimeters. And the outsole lug height is around 3.5 millimeters. Combined stack that I get, just going from the base of the outsole lug through to the insole when it's in there, 33 millimeters in the heel, 27 in the forefoot. All right, so let's dig into the model from the top down. All right, so the upper. In the forefoot or the vamp, engineered knit material, really soft, allows the metatarsals to push out a little bit and splay when you need them to, and also just kind of spring back in terms of the elasticity of the fabric as its baseline. It has a rubberized or TPU laminated on toe guard, and that extends all the way around the side of the shoe and merges with the back heel cup, which is really just a laminate there. The quarter panels in the sides of the shoe, they're using the matrix material, which I referenced in the beginning. Matrix, which I think first experienced in the Salomon S-Lab Cross, I think it's a pretty great material. So one of the properties is it's hydrophobic, so when you put it through water, and it's more noticeable in the Infinite, where it's got a more full upper of matrix, that the water literally drains right off of it. The other property, which is pretty awesome, so they weave in aramid fiber, and this is something I also covered or reviewed with the VJ Max shoe, which also uses aramid. One of the trade names is Kevlar, and that's woven into the material, which just creates a really durable material. So what it allows the material to do is provide a decent amount of support in terms of the foot pushing out, and that's reinforced by some TPU overlays, but it also allows it to really hold up over miles. The way that they use the matrix in the Flight VECTIV, I don't know, I'm sure it has a certain amount of midfoot hold, but I feel like you're getting more of the support in off-camber pitches from the TPU laminates rather than matrix material itself. Where they used it in the Infinite in full length, I feel like one of the common blowout points for individuals is in the forefoot, and often that's where an overlay meets a base fabric. So in this case, it would be right around there. So for them to use in the Infinite a full-length matrix, I think that's pretty great because it provides a really durable fabric right over that first met head where it's sometimes blown out. In the Flight series, where they put it in the quarter panels, I don't know if it's quite as effective there, but still a pretty cool fabric. The TPU overlays in the heel, they reach forward to meet the top lace hole and encompass basically that matrix fabric. It extends over the heel, and the heel is a really soft or flexible heel, as opposed to having an internal thermoplastic cup in there. And then that wraps up with a basically a mono tongue, which I think is great. It had me, I think, reflect back to one of my brother's first Nike sock racers, I think, which came out in like 1985. And I just remember thinking that was such a cool shoe. And this is just kind of like an evolution of that, basically. So the engineered knit forefoot basically seamlessly blends into the mono tongue. It's great in the sense that you don't even need basically a gusset there because it's a mono design. And it keeps it in place. You don't have to worry about the tongue sliding one way or the other or having to loop it in. It has in the tongue some spot padding. The laces are flat laces, so they rest pretty just flat over your instep. And what they use for the eyelets, as opposed to having some sort of like inset metal eyelet, it's basically just a perforation in that TPU material right there. So it allows the lace to really wrap and sit flat, and so you don't really need a ton of padding in the tongue. I'm guessing that some individuals who have a tendency to maybe crank down their laces a little bit too much are going to have a complaint about not enough padding in the tongue. For me, it hasn't been an issue. Laces stay tied pretty well. Out in the freezing temps today, where I was putting it through some creek crossings, when the laces froze, they had a tendency to come untied just because of the flat nature. But in normal conditions, not really an issue. So that one piece or mono tongue then extends back into an engineered knit heel collar back here, which I think is a really nice design, an improvement over what they used as a design in the Infinite model. And I'll tell you why here in a second. And that fabric allows it to basically compress or elasticize back in around your medial and lateral malleoli, which is really nice. In the heel itself, you've got a wedge-shaped pad, and that basically sits on top of the calcaneus and wraps around the Achilles. And then you have the engineered knit that rises on top of that. I think it has a really nice feel. The shoe feels stable enough where I don't really have an issue where I feel like I need more rigidity or support there. One of the downsides, though, is similar to the Infinite, is in that spot padding in the back where they have the engineered knit come up. Basically, it leaves a gap right along your medial and lateral malleoli around your Achilles area and around the heel. And so what happens is the debris will get down in there and it's got no place to go. In the Flight VECTIV, this wrap sits closer to my malleoli, which is really nice. In the Infinite, they had basically the padding extend a little bit further and just a little bit different material, which wasn't as elastic in the heel collar, and that created a bigger gap for debris to get down in there. So something just to be aware of. But as a whole, I think the upper is a really nice design. Oh, actually, one thing, another potential improvement area, something I also experienced with the VECTIV Infinite. So on these, what I believe is TPU laminates, they are pretty effective in a couple different facets. One is just for abrasion resistance, or if you're kicking something, and it also protects the engineered knit upper. The other thing that it does is it adds a little bit of support or stability of the upper on those off-camber pitches. Downside is, though, and I think from my perspective, a design flaw is they don't have perforations in that laminate there. In the Infinite review, I pointed out in, for instance, some of the Topo models where they do have the laminate in the front, they have perforations there to allow the water to push out. In this case, they don't have any perforations or drain holes there, so once the water gets in, it basically is trapped like a pool, and it just sticks there for a while. Going down a layer from the upper, their insole, I didn't get a response from my rep crew on what the material is here. It may just be EVA, I'm not sure. But the nice part is that it has more of a closed cell rubberized material than what's used in the Infinite. The Infinite uses an Ortholite insole, and it's basically a porous material that really soaks up water and acts like a sponge when you submerge it. So I was really excited to find that in the Flight VECTIV that they used a less porous material and it's not as much of an issue. So although water still gets trapped a bit in there, it's not sponging and sloshing around like it does as much with the Ortholite insole. The plate that they're using is a carbon plate here. So in the three models, the Flight, the Infinite, and then the Endurus, which I don't have just yet, they use different materials. The carbon plate is the thinnest. It's the lightest, and it's also designed to basically offer max propulsion versus T-Back's plate rather in the Infinite, which is designed to be balanced. Truthfully, I can't really tell what I'm experiencing in terms of the benefit of the plate. What I most feel is the rocker bottom of the midsole, and I'll get into that in just a second. But the plate definitely in there, no doubt providing a certain amount of support and really, I imagine, doing its job in terms of propulsion. I just can't tease it out. The design of the plate is 3D, so you see the fins that come up to wrap the hindfoot, as well as tabs on the inside and outside on the forefoot there. And the 3D design of them allows it to have a little bit more durability where the plate just doesn't pack out as much. And supposedly, or the word is that in their athlete testing, that having them come up a bit just added a little bit more support, again, on those off-camber or pitch surfaces. And I think they probably do just that. One of the downside, I shouldn't even say a downside. For my foot, I'm used to allowing, or I basically need a certain amount of splay room in the forefoot of a shoe. I've got a fat fifth toe, thanks to my grandmom, that will push out if a shoe is cut or tapered too much on the outside. When I'm going downhill in the VECTIV series, both this one and the Infinite, and if I'm pushing out at all, I start feeling that tab just a little bit on the outside. It hasn't really bothered me. It hasn't caused any bruising, but I would guess that over long or ultra miles, I may start feeling that more. So just something maybe for them to consider in the future. The midsole material that they're using is a two-part EVA, 55 on the top, I believe, 45 on the bottom. A little bit firmer where it meets the, and that's a durometer, where it meets the plate. It provides a little bit more structure underneath the plate, and I imagine that allows the two to work together a little bit better. And then a little bit softer midsole, or softer EVA down below to allow the shoe to adapt to varied terrain and have a little bit more cushioned underfoot feel. I really like the EVA here. I think a lot of companies in their top tier models have basically moved away from EVA. The claims are always, oh, it's 20% lighter, it's 20% more durable. I don't really know how to gauge or judge those claims. If that were the case, and I guess I've been in the shoe world for maybe 20 years now, and I've had my own shops for, I guess, going on 15 years. And if it were the case that the midsole were always getting more durable, we'd be seeing shoes last a whole lot longer than they are. But the reality is that I'm seeing shoes basically wear out as quick as they pretty much always have. So I'm always dubious of those claims. So all that to say is, I don't know if North Face needs to use some higher or more expensive, more proprietary midsole material. I think the EVA works just fine. Whereas it may pack out a little quicker than some materials in versus other, I guess, blends, non-EVA blends. I think the protection and the force of the plate will allow it to have a little bit more durability than it would otherwise. Dropping down a layer, Outsole Rubber. They're using a proprietary or in-house blend. They call it Surface Control. It uses 40% biomass in the midsole, or the outsole rubber rather. And so when the outsole rubber shaves off, they're just allowing it to be more biodegradable. I think that's really classy, very much needed. So thank you to North Face for one of those environmental considerations. The outsole rubber itself, in terms of stickiness, I feel like it's pretty sticky. I'll plug in at least the written review where I did a testing, basically head-to-head, same conditions over some of the slickest terrain spots that I'm aware of, that I've ever experienced, and I've been around a bit, and the North Face really held its own. In that test, the VJ came up top, the Asics grip surprisingly was number 2, and then the Vibram Mega Grip and Graphene were below that. But in that next tier down came in that Surface Control right up there with Salomon's Conta Grip TA. They really held their own really quite well. I was pleasantly surprised with the Surface Control. The lug configuration here, they're not the deepest lugs. This isn't going to be your go-to shoe for muddy conditions, but they are versatile lugs. They have a butterfly shape here, which allows it to perform well on, I guess, varied pitches, cambers, or what have you. And the groove right down the center of the butterfly, I believe, is a water channel in creek crossings or otherwise wet conditions. The lug depth, again, at only 3.5 millimeters, makes the shoe cross over pretty well to hard pack conditions or like roads. It still feels pretty smooth. The outsole rubber itself is fairly soft, so as with the Infinite, I'm starting to shave off the outsole rubber fairly quickly, but that's fairly common for me, not a reflection, I think, on poor rubber here. Just know, but if you're putting in a lot of road miles, which I've had to put in some road miles because we got a good dump of snow this past week, it is a fairly soft rubber. So one of the pieces that I somewhat skipped over, and which is probably the biggest felt property of the VECTIV series, is the rocker geometry. The closest thing that I've experienced or felt is in the Skechers Razor. And basically the fulcrum is right here. I'll plug a clip of me just basically pitching it over the fulcrum and sliding in a paper from the front and back to really see just how much of the rocker is really there. So it really gets contact right about there and is up on either side. Before I got the Infinite in, I was really wondering whether I was going to feel the rocker and what that was going to feel like. And right out of the box, you feel it. And so that is what it is. I come preloaded with not being a big fan of rocker geometry. With a background, my initial career was an occupational therapist, so I had the training in anatomy, physiology, kinesiology, that whole bit. And so from my vantage point, the foot, as well as the whole kinetic chain, is a pretty amazing design, basically. And the foot is designed specifically with a medial longitudinal arch, lateral longitudinal arch, medial transverse arch, or metatarsal transverse arch in the forefoot. And they're all working in concert to allow the foot to basically uncouple, adapt to variable terrain, find a stable point, and toe off fairly stable. And what it's also doing, in addition to finding a stable plant and being responsive, is it's absorbing impact and storing it as elastic or kinetic energy. Really amazing design. And so you can try to change that, and you can say, all right, I'm going to increase the efficiency of the foot by throwing a rocker design underneath it. Well, historically, some of these studies have shown that that may be more effective for a midfoot striker that's already coming down midfoot, but basically the force still has to go somewhere. So whereas some of the studies that showed a decreased loading in the plantar fascia arch area, as well as on the Achilles as a lever arm, they also found increased loading around the knee. Again, the forces have to go somewhere. And in my experience so far with the shoe, I am noticing a little bit more soreness in my quads and a little bit more stress to my metatarsals. I can't really tease out whether that's really the rocker design or whether that's really transitioning to running some in snow. So I can't be sure there, but just something that I'm experiencing. Because I do make heel contact first or braid it going through in my gait cycle, the rocker design probably is a little less appropriate for me. But I can say, with all of that said, and again, already being predisposed to not being a fan of rocker geometry, that it really does feel fun and pretty cool underfoot. So historically, if you're somebody that has like the Skechers, you've liked the Pearl Izumi, Scott to a certain extent, some of these niche shoes which have had really cult and loyal followings, you may be really into what North Face is doing here. I'm really excited to see if I can get access to it, some of their internal testing with their team. I would love to see really what they found in terms of increasing running efficiency, whether they found it or not. And I may get access to that and I may not. But I'm really curious to see it. But it is very noticeable in the shoe when you first put it on. And because of that, as I mentioned before, I can't really tease out what's the plate, what's the rocker. But it is something that I think will be intriguing to people. And if it is, man, pick up a pair. It's definitely pretty fun. So, is it worth it? Well, I don't know. Some people out there are just going to be really intrigued about the basically technology and design that they're using in the VECTIV series, and that may just be worth it. It's really cool. It's great that they're pushing the boundaries, using that top-notch matrix material, using a really slick engineered mesh upper. It feels just as good barefoot with how they've treated the inside as it does as a technical trail shoe. And it does roll on the trails. Outsole rubber, again, is pretty sticky. It's a really nice complete package. A couple things that I'd like to see them improve on version 2, but it is pretty slick. So if you have the means to pick up a pair, might be worth checking it out. I have enjoyed the miles so far. I'll keep putting some miles into it. If I come up with anything else to really comment on, I'll weave it back into the written review. But North Face, nice work getting to market with a premier shoe, really pushing the boundaries of tech materials, and nice work. So thanks for tuning in this round. Drop a line on the YouTube feed if you've got any questions at all. Thanks for liking our channel. Thanks for liking this video if you like it. And thanks for the support. All right, catch you next round. See ya.